recently, over the past, let's say, 5 years, we've seen large-scale civil society movements around the world around specific issues. So everything from Black Lives Matter, sort of dealing with racial inequalities structured within the US, but that's been applicable globally, through to Roads Must Fall, Fees Must Fall, which started in South Africa, but which also kind of went forward as a need for decoloniality, to sort of really recognize colonial past and how research in particular needed to be done better, through to Extinction Rebellion, for example, or Fridays for the Future, which is sort of bringing an environmental component into sort of civil society movements and practice. And you can see how increasingly gender-based violence, the Me Too movement, all of that has been another really important framing. And you can think of, well, what has the Me Too campaign got to do with the food system, for example? But actually kind of the rooted embeddedness of the patriarchy of gender roles have a really important implication in the food system, where mothers are supposed to be seen as these carers and providers who cook nutritious meals. And now that they're going to work, kids are sort of relying on processed foods, for example. So quite often the burden then sort of gets put back onto women, for example, as a sort of very minor point. And so actually you were seeing these different movements finding each other and sort of finding the linkages, that how the Me Too movements around sort of gender-based violence and sort of female emancipation against the patriarchy is also strongly linked to Black Lives Matter, and in particular around the oppression that Black women in particular sort of face on a day-to-day basis. But that's also linked largely to the environmental movement too. And so there's this notion of intersectionality, that actually these movements of concern that we see happen globally are actually tightly connected, and that we need to stand together if we're actually going to affect some kind of transformative change towards a better society globally. And if we think about intersectionality in that way, the implications, I think, for the food system are quite clear, because they are to do with gender. They are to do with colonial past. The food system is also very implicit both in the problem around sustainability, but also in the solution. And so sort of being able to bring those arguments together, I think, is a really powerful way to move forward and think about food system change.